Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We are Two Guys and a Mouse. My name's Lance, and I'm here with Les. And on Two Guys and a Mouse, we give you the tips and tricks to getting the most out of your Disney vacation. So we are discussing the Epcot Food and Wine Festival that runs from July to November in Epcot down at the Walt Disney World Resort. And that's coming up next. Hey guys, welcome back to Two Guys and a Mouse. So today's episode 2 on our series about the Epcot Food and Wine Festival. If you haven't seen the first episode, we'll put the link right up here so you guys can check it out. By the way guys, if you're new here, welcome. We thank you for stopping by. If you wouldn't mind, consider subscribing and turning notifications on so that you know whenever we release new content. So, as a recap, we talked about the different resort types down at Walt Disney World Resort, and just to kind of give you guys a overview of that, there's the value, the moderates, the deluxe, and the deluxe villas, which are typically DVC resorts. And so now that we know about when the Food and Wine Festival is and where we're going to stay, let's talk a little bit about, trip planning. How are we going to get down to Walt Disney World? Being that we live on the East Coast, let's talk about driving. I know I've driven down there a couple of times, and Les, you've driven to Walt Disney World quite a few times, is that correct?
Yep, I just drove down in April of this year. It's the most recent time, and we've actually driven down quite a few times now.
Gotcha. And about typically how long does it take you guys to drive? Like, I know I have small children typically with me, so it takes me what I feel should be 16 to 18 hours, sometimes takes 18 to 20 hours, because of the stops that we have to make. I don't know, this time when we drive down in June, we're probably going to take more stops because we have the 2-year-old. So we're probably going to do a halfway overnight. But, in your experience, about how long does it take you to drive?
And so we typically drive straight through. The quickest that I ever made it down was about 14 and a half, 15 hours. Typically 16 to 18 seems to hit the mark for us. Okay. And again, that's coming from Pennsylvania. So, but my children are older, and when they sometimes they don't go with, sometimes it's just my wife and I, so we can usually drive down pretty quick. Obviously, if you have small children that are traveling with you, that may slow you down a little bit, as you may need to make more frequent stops for food and bathroom breaks and stuff like that.
Right. And so driving down, it does lead to a couple of other things that we need to discuss. So when you do drive down to the resorts and you're taking your vehicle, guys, be aware that at the Walt Disney World Resort, when you stay on property, there is a parking fee that you have to pay when you stay at the resorts. Now, I know that for the value resorts and the moderates, it's somewhere right around the $20 range at the time of this recording. As always, things are subject to change, and nothing's ever set in stone, especially with prices always in flux. So at the time of this recording, typically the prices are around the $20 to $30 mark for the deluxe or moderate resorts. Now that price is a little bit more expensive for the the moderates and the value resorts. The price is a little bit more expensive for the deluxe resorts and the deluxe villas. However, am I correct in saying, Les, that as a DVC member, you do not have to pay for parking?
So parking at DVC, as a DVC member, when I went in April, I stayed at the Polynesian Resort, and I did not have to pay for parking while we were staying on property. And subsequently, as a side bonus, because bus transportation wasn't spectacular as what it's been pre-COVID, we actually had management tell us that we were allowed to drive our own vehicles to the parks, which we did, or at least the ones that were not. So we didn't to Magic Kingdom because we just took water transportation to Magic Kingdom, but for Epcot, Animal Kingdom, and Hollywood Studios, we actually drove our own vehicle and because we were staying on property, they just scanned my Magic Band, and we were allowed through without having to pay parking, which was very nice as well.
Nice. Yeah, and there are some pros to having your own vehicle over the cons, right? So, if you're not a DVC member or you don't have an annual pass, then yes, you do have to pay for the parking at the resorts. But the pros to that is, you can leave when you want, and you don't have to fight crowds on the buses to get in and out of the resort, or excuse me, not the resort, the parks. So at the end of the night, after everybody's trying to pack on the buses, you can go to your car. Upsides, downsides, yeah, you don't have to fight people getting on the bus, but you have to fight traffic getting in and out of the park, or of the parking lot at the parks. Just because everybody who's driving has to go through it, and there is a little bit of a walk, especially with how big the parking lot is at Magic Kingdom. But I like the bus transportation. Now, the other nice thing about having your own vehicle with down at the resort is, and Disney, they really don't want you to, but you have the ability to leave property. And I remember one time we went down, we rented a vehicle, and we drove out to Cape Canaveral to check out the space shuttle and the Kennedy Space Center and everything like that. So that was pretty neat. And we went to Dave and Buster's for lunch, and we just got to generally explore Orlando. And don't tell Disney this, but one of these trips I'm going to drive down, and I'm going to take my son, who's now going to be 11. I think he's old enough to hit Universal Studios, so we're going to check that out because I haven't been there since I was probably about his age, maybe a little older, maybe 13 years old. So we're going to check that out. But the downside to having your own vehicle is at the end of your vacation, after spending a week down in Florida, you have to drive back home. The 14, 16, 18, 24 hours it takes to get to, where you live. Which segues me into the next mode of transportation to get to the parks, or excuse me, down to the resort, is the auto train. Les, have you ever taken the auto train?
I have not had the pleasure of taking the auto train.
So the auto train is really neat. I had the pleasure of taking the auto train for a trip once, and it was only one direction. It was going back from the resort back to Pennsylvania. So the auto train, what that is, it's an Amtrak run train, and it goes from Lorton, Virginia down to Sanford, which is in Orlando, Florida. It's just north of Orlando. And it's a straight through trip, and it's an overnight trip. Now you have a couple of different ticketing options. You can sit in coach, which is just a general typical passenger car. Now the nice thing about coach on a train is that the coach seats are very similar to a first class seat on an airline. So you're not really cramped. I mean, the seats relatively lie back, not quite flat, but they lie back quite a bit. You get free Wi-Fi. Yes, it takes about 18 hours overnight to maybe probably a little bit less than 18 hours. I would say it's like, 14 hours. It's an overnight trip. But the nice thing is you're not driving. You show up, the auto train departs at 2 o'clock p.m. from Sanford in Florida, and they load the train, and then right about 4 o'clock, they're actually done loading and they depart. So you have a couple options. There's your coach, then you can get a private car, which is a sleeper car, and that sleeps 4 people. You can get a half a sleeper car, or you could get anywhere in between. There are a couple of first class seating accommodations, which are really nice. They're almost like semi-private rooms. The nice thing about the first class sleeper car cabins is that it does have a private shower. You have your own bathroom. All of your snacks and drinks are included, as well as your dinner and breakfast. So, keep that in mind. And when you're looking at the ticketing pricing, if you do the coach, it doesn't include any access to first class lounges or your meals. You do get a snack, and I believe there is a continental breakfast, but dinner you do have to pay separately for it. Now the dinner on the auto train, let me tell you, is fantastic. When we went, we were served our choice, and I got the short rib with some creamed potatoes, and I believe it was like a side of broccoli or something like that. maybe asparagus. I don't remember. It was a couple years ago, but food is really really good. They serve it all nice fine china in the dining car. And it's really nice. Or you can do a hybrid. So like I said, I drove down and then I took the auto train back, which was nice because I didn't have to drive back. So I was very relaxed on the way back, and it was almost like all the stress of driving just went away, and I still maintained the stress-free vacation type environment. So the auto train is an option or a combination therein. Another option, and the most obvious option, and I would say the one that's applicable to probably 85% of the country, is going to be flying. And that is what most people are going to do. Now, when you fly to Walt Disney World, there's 2 airports that you can fly into in Orlando. Technically 3 if you fly into what is the there's another oh gosh, what's the beach called? Melbourne or something like that. For all intents and purposes, there's 2 airports. You have SFB and you have MCO, which is Orlando International. Flying into MCO, there is or even to SFB, you do have to contend with actually getting from the airport to the resort. If you're flying into SFB, you have the option of either Uber or Lyft, or you can rent a vehicle and then drive it to the resort. But mind you, you're paying for the vehicle rental, and you're also paying for parking for the week. So that takes me to MCO. Right now, Disney offers a complimentary service called the Magical Express. And if you have either a Disney Vacation Club membership, or you book directly through Disney or a Disney travel partner to stay on property, there is a bus service called the Magical Express for free at the time of recording that takes you from MCO to your resort and back when your trip is done. Now, in January of 2022, that service will cease to exist, and it is getting replaced by Mears Connect. Is that right, Les?
That's correct. So it's currently Mears right now. So Disney partners with Mears transportation services. The buses say Disney Express on the side. I've actually been on buses that actually said Mears on the side. Usually, when you get picked up at the airport at MCO, you're on a bus that's themed and painted in Disney colors, and so, like you said, they're going to stop at the end of this year. Now, Mears has taken it upon themselves to continue doing the service. It won't be called the Disney Express anymore. It's called Mears Connect. When you were going through Disney, you would make that as a part of your travel plans through the My Disney Experience website. They would send you baggage tags in the mail. You would put those on your bags, and Disney could track those when they got to MCO, and they would magically show up in your room. So basically, after you walked off the plane, you went to the Disney area that's at the bottom of the MCO airport, and you would get on your bus. It would take you to your resort. So Mears is going to do something similar to that, and they have 2 different packages, and there's the standard level, and there is an express level of service. So basically, the standard right now, and these prices are what's being published right now, obviously prone to change, but the standard booking for a single person is $32 per adult, $27 per child, and that is round trip. While if you do an express, that is $200, but that gets you anywhere from 1 to 4 people, and then I believe if you need more than 4 people, then what they do is they charge you an extra $55 per person after that. Basically, the standard booking on the Mears Connect will get you essentially a bus, just like the Disney Express is now. You'll probably be lumped in with other guests that are going to the same resort that you are, or a resort that's on the way to your resort, whereas the premium or the express service is going to be a little more personalized. You may actually have like a little van or a little shuttle bus that will just be your party and your party alone, which is why it costs a little bit more. So that starts in January of 2022.
Gotcha. Now let's go off on a little tangent here about the Magical Express and Mears Connect. So as it stands now, Magical Express is contracted through Disney to Mears, but are the cast members who drive the current Magical Express buses, are they Disney cast members or are they Mears employees?
As far as I
Do you
know,
know that
they're Mears
information?
employees.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious as to how moving forward, because in my experience for the Magical Express, the bus drivers have been wonderful. I mean, granted, there's some who are better than others, but for the most part, they're really good. I mean, I tip my driver for sure, but they put all your bags on the bus for you. They take it off the bus for you. They get it to Bell Services, magically appears in your room. Is that going to be the case? Will we still get that level of service with Mears Connect, where our bags can be magically in our room for us upon arrival, or will we have to get off the plane, go down to baggage claim, find someone, tip them $20 to get our bags off the belt, take it down to the terminal where Magical Express or Mears Connect picks up now, and then tip the driver, to have a good trip. I mean, what's it going to be like? I'm curious to see how that's going to be. I don't know if the attitudes and the and everything will be held through, because as far as I know, Disney's the one that decided to cancel that contract. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, and I think it's very unfortunate that they did that. Monitoring various Facebook groups and information from other channels like ours, they seems to be there was a lot of disappointment when Disney released that statement that they were going to end it. For a lot of guests and a lot of families, that's part of the experience. Sure. It was really nice to not have to pay for that service. So obviously, right. I'm making an assumption it's a cost cutting move on their part. Why they didn't want to offer that anymore. It was just an expense that they wouldn't have to incur anymore. So yeah. Mears obviously wants to fill in the gap, but you will have to pay for it.
Sure.
According to a press release that they put out, they're basically have stated that it's a scheduled service. I take that to mean that it's going to be very similar to what the Magical Express is right now. It does say there will be luggage handling, but it doesn't go into any details on that. There will be a staging area, as I explained earlier, that Disney has right now. So I'm sure they will have their own little slice of MCO airport somewhere where they will be having all of the Disney guests gather and then be escorted to the shuttles. And then obviously the return trip when your vacation is over, just like the Magical Express is right now. So they'll bring you back. How that will work remains to be seen. Right now, the process for the Magical Express, since Disney obviously knows when you're checking out and you've already provided them your flight details, that's how they know when you're arriving and when you're departing. Typically what happens is the night before you leave, you will get what is
your little ticket.
What's called the Tragical Express letter, because that means you're leaving the next day. So typically that will be left in your room, and that will give you the details of when you must meet the bus at your resort to head back to the airport. Typically right now, I think it's always been that basically 3 hours, around 3 hours before your flight departs is when you have to meet the bus so you can get back to the airport in time to go through security. And
that's a minimum too, because I know I've taken the Magical Express back, and that 3 hours is really, depending on when you're flying out. If you're flying out at a really popular time, you might not be a crowded Magical Express back to the airport, but to get through security, especially with the amount of security that you have to go through, to get your bags checked, to get through security, and it's I'm not gonna lie to you, it's about an hour drive from the resort to MCO, right? So right there kills an hour right there. And for domestic flights, they want you there 2 hours before your flight leaves. I sometimes I kind of question if I'm going to make it through security in time or not. But I mean, with the transition into Mears Connect, this could also spell, and again, here, this is all speculation and conjecture and wishful thinking on my part, but, that could also open it up some, too, as far as right now, the only transportation that's provided from Disney, free or otherwise, is from MCO. And you have to fly into MCO. Now, I would say 60% of the people flying from a major airport, Philadelphia, JFK, Newark, whatever. You're flying from a major airport, not a problem, right? Or, you live in a big enough city that you can get a direct flight to MCO. Now, we live in Allentown, which isn't a tiny town. We don't live in a podunk town. But, it's not a major metropolitan area like Philadelphia. We have Lehigh Valley International Airport. The Lehigh Valley International Airport, the only direct service that goes from Allentown to Orlando, flies into Sanford. At the time of this recording, there are no options to get from Sanford to the resort unless you rent a car or you pay for an Uber or a Lyft, which, depending on the time of day and the mood of the driver, could be anywhere from $60 to $200, depending on, how many people you have, baggage, time of day, etc. So this could be a good thing if they open it up to, flights coming in and out of Sanford. For us, we have Allegiant Air, and you can get a cheap flight. I'm talking like $60 each way, from Allentown to SFB. And then sure, you want to include bags, but, if you're a DVC member or if you're an annual pass holder, and you have the owner's lockers, you really don't need to carry a lot of stuff, which, owner's lockers we'll talk about in another episode. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? You think they'll open it up? Because I know the demand's there, So.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. Sanford's further away from Disney property than MCO is, so
it is.
You have that as well, which is why if you do a ride-sharing service like Uber or Lyft, it's going to cost more than it would even if you flew into MCO. Yeah. But unfortunately, like you said, a lot of the smaller regional airports, they just don't have the means or the capacity to fly into MCO. It's a very, very busy airport, and as I'm sure you can testify, if you've ever flown through MCO, even if you were just going to Orlando for something other than Disney, it is an extremely busy airport, and at all times of the day, security, very long lines. It's just very, very busy. So
for sure. It is, and with the two different terminals, and it gets confusing because if you get on the wrong shuttle, it's at least a 45-minute walk back to get to the right place of because there's the terminal A, terminal B, and not everything departs out of B like most places, but it can get confusing. It is a busy airport, especially with the amount of people. Traveling with small children, typically at non-Orlando airports that have Disney, typically if you're traveling with small children, they let you get on the plane first because you need extra time to get the children acclimated and strapped in, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, with Orlando International, 95% of the people are traveling with children, so they're like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You get in line, with everybody. So, so the pros and cons are there, and with flying, again, if you don't have a car, you're kind of trapped on property, although it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But, we've run out of time for this episode, guys. But if you subscribe and turn notifications on, you'll be notified whenever we release new content. Hey, thanks for stopping by and hanging out with us. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.